As I'm sure you've probably heard, Project 2025 released some training videos not too long ago for people. I don't think they were originally intended to be public, but they are public now. So I want to listen to what they had to say here. It's absolutely wild. This video is titled The Federal Workforce. And these are like lawyers involved in the Trump administration to some degree that are talking about all this stuff. And they're explaining how to like get around laws and things. It's crazy. So let's give this a listen, see what they have to say. While we listen to this, we can play some Breath of the Wild 2, Tears of the Kingdom. Should just be in the background, won't bother you too much. You never played.
Whole situation. There are just between 3,000 and 4,000 political appointees sitting atop millions of career federal employees and bureaucrats.
Yeah, this is their stupid intro. I'm just going to skip past it. So their big complaint is that there aren't more people in the federal workforce that are appointed. Like Fauci, I think he is appointed by the president, but he worked in government trying to stop pandemics and stuff for like 30, 40 years or something, didn't he? They want everybody all the way down the chain to be politically appointed. It's trying to create a deep state is what's happening.
Hi, my name is Spencer Cradian, and I serve at the Heritage Foundation as Associate Director of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project, or Project 2025. This is a coalition of more than 40 conservative organizations in D.C.
I love how they tried to downplay it and say that this is not a big deal, you guys are crazy. And we get the training videos, and they're like, this is such a big deal. They are not crazy.
Of more than 40 conservative organizations in D.C. and out of D.C. And our goal is to ensure that the conservative administration that takes office in January of 2025 is ready on day one. Ready with people, ready with policy, and ready with plans. Project 2025 is organized into 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is a policy book. It's going to be released in the spring of 2023.
It was released. 900-page manifesto. It's long, and it is absolutely nuts.
And it's going to outline a conservative vision of success at each federal agency. We have almost 400 people who are contributing to this policy book. It's a lot to manage.
You know, I don't have a problem with them like having a transition plan or whatever. Like everybody has a transition plan. That's fine. It's that they're trying to form out a deep state that I have a problem with. Like, oh my God, people.
Pillar 2 is a personnel database. We want Mr. and Mrs. Smith to come to Washington. And we're going to go out and identify and recruit people to be in this personnel database. People at high levels, people at low levels, and everybody in between. Pillar 3 is a series of trainings, just like this video. These are important because we want the people who go to Washington in 2025 to serve the next president to be well-trained, to know.
Like we watched another one of these, and in that one, it was about language and code words. They said you must remove the words climate change from every federal document that comes across your desk, everything. And the reason that they want to replace everybody up the chain, including like low-level people, is because you never know which person is going to be useful to you. Like the DMV is a state-level thing, but hypothetically, let's say that they intended to change the DMV managers or whatever. They wanted them to be political appointees. If they can get the DMV managers under their thumb, they can determine if people are going to be registered to vote when they get their driver's license, as they're supposed to, as they're legally required to, or, you know, that they have the option to do that. They can determine which registrations are submitted and all kinds of other things. You never know which person along the chain is going to be useful to you.
What to expect and to have an idea of what they can do to restore greatness to our country. And then Pillar 4 is a playbook, a game plan for each federal agency in more detail than Pillar 1, starting with the official transition period and going out all the way the first 6 months of the new administration. We need to know what at each agency needs to happen on day 1. What needs to happen on day 2, day 5, day 10? Who are the people who need to be in place, the positions that need to be filled immediately? That's Pillar 4. Each of these pillars plays a vital role in Project 2025. By way of introduction, I'm a former special assistant to President Donald Trump and Associate Director of Presidential Personnel.
Dude, I love that Donald Trump denied having any affiliation with these people at all, with Project 2025 or anything. And every single person in these training videos was in his administration in some way, involved, connected to him somehow. It's like you can't lie at this point. By the way, if you guys can like watch to the end of the video, it'd be really appreciated. That's how YouTube judges if a video should go further, is based on watch time.
It was my job to staff the administration for the president at various federal agencies, and I'm honored to be doing much of the same work in my role with Project 2025 from outside of government. One of the highlights of my time in the White House was that I got to work with Caitlin Stumpf. She was my deputy, and she's now also here with me at the Heritage Foundation. And the two of us are going to be doing this video together. Now, as we think...
So the point here is that these people were White House staff members under Donald Trump. And when they left the White House, they moved over to working for Project 2025 so that they could prep for the next transition. That is nuts, man.
About the federal government, we need to think about the federal workforce. It has about 2 million full-time non-military employees. And when you add in the...
Don't trust anything from him, by the way. I'm sure I don't need to say it. I'm going to say it anyway. Don't trust a word out of his mouth, even trivial stuff. You got to look this stuff up yourself.
It has about 2 million full-time non-military employees. And when you add in the contractors, the number is well more than 10 million. That's a lot of people. But the American people don't elect the bureaucrats. They don't elect the federal contractors.
That's because they're just doing their jobs. They're normal people. They're not political. They're in non-political positions, like the DMV person or whatever. Just doing their job.
They elect a president, and the president's job is to faithfully execute the laws of our country. The president, of course, does not have the hours in the day to personally perform every function of government. So he outsources that to the bureaucracy by necessity, to all of those federal employees and contractors. But he does have some help. Helping him are between 3,000 and 4,000 political appointees. These are the president's people, the people he brings with him to Washington, and they occupy government jobs. But they're not like what we might call the normal federal employees.
Look, they're talking about political appointees, and they have Kavanaugh here, like Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. Isn't that fascinating? That's really funny.
Not like.
He's not supposed to be a political appointee. He's supposed to be apolitical, and they're showing him in the list. That's just great.
What we might call the normal federal employees. They serve in accepted roles. Now, in Washington, D.C., in this town, you frequently hear people say, my dad worked for 30 years at the Department of Labor, or my sister served 5 different presidents as a Foreign Service officer. Well, chances are that is referring to federal employees.
Dude, this guy is so bland, it's ridiculous.
Who are hired through the normal hiring process. There are all sorts of rules and regulations that govern that process. If you want a federal job, they look at your qualifications, your expertise, your work history, your salary history. It's supposed to be competitive and objective. If the Department of Energy is hiring a nuclear engineer who's going to be handling radioactive waste, clearly there are some very specific qualifications that are needed. If the IRS is hiring an HR manager, perhaps less expertise is needed. But the point is that those federal employees are not at risk of losing their jobs with a change in presidential administration.
That's because they're non-political actors. They're just doing their job at the Department of Energy or whatever. These people are trying to make literally every single position political. They're trying to deck out the entire government with Trump loyalists, basically, is what they're describing right now. And if you notice, they were talking earlier about a database. They want to build a database of names. They've been working on this database of names of people who are paying close attention to politics and are very political and Trump supporters and are willing to go in and do whatever these people ask. They've built this database, and it took them about 2 years to do. How long would it take Kamala Harris to build a database of people like that to, fill those political appointee positions that he's trying to replace? It would take years, just like it took them. So Kamala Harris would have to, by necessity, let Trump loyalists stay in those positions because they're best qualified now because they've been in the job for like 4 years. That's how they're playing this whole thing.
In fact, they have incredible job security. You've probably read stories or heard examples, but the federal government is notorious for its inability to fire virtually anybody. Even if
I mean, it's not an inability to fire people. They just have like a good union, don't they? Are you serious right now?
its inability to fire virtually anybody. Even if an employee is in trouble,
Like, that's just a lie. You can fire people if they do a bad job.
there are hearings, appeals, benefit of the doubt always granted, and it's very rare that the federal workforce will actually fire one of its own.
Dude, are you shitting me right now?
But accepted service, the kind that political appointees engage in, is not subject to these same rules and these same standards. These 3,000 to 4,000 appointees serve at the pleasure of the president, and they can be removed by the president at any time. So they don't enjoy the usual perks of federal service.
Wait, is that a good thing then or not? He's framing it up like it's a bad thing, and then he's jumping over and framing it up like it's good. Should people, should there be reason to fire somebody or not? I don't understand.
But the converse of that, the 3,000 to 4,000 political appointees don't apply through the competitive process. Their qualifications are not evaluated by career federal HR departments. They're there because the president wants them there, and they serve the president. Consider this whole situation. There are just between 3,000 and 4,000 political appointees sitting atop millions of career federal employees and bureaucrats.
Again, they're just doing their job. They're not political or working for whatever. They're not working for Democrats. This guy's trying to create a deep state and complaining that one doesn't exist that's loyal to him.
Is that really enough? The president brought those few thousand people with him to change the direction of the government, and the president is expected to deliver what he ran on. The appointees are the ones who make it happen, those 3,000 to 4,000 people. In fact, it would be impossible for the president to change anything without them. Is 3,000 to 4,000 political appointees enough to turn around that federal battleship?
Okay, now think about what he's saying here. He's describing a situation in which the president appoints so many people within government, or he replaces so many people with his loyalists, that he doesn't need checks or balances anymore to get the job done. That is a feature of democracy, and why democracy is superior to dictatorship, for example, because there are checks and balances. Yeah, you can get a whole bunch of stuff done under a dictatorship, but do you really know that the things that this dictator is going to do are actually good? In a democracy, these things can be debated into the ground. In a dictatorship, this guy's making decisions for everybody, and that's just the end of the conversation. Democracies are slow moving, but almost always make the right decisions, or more commonly, at the very least, make the right decisions, because usually in a democracy, the majority of voters are on point, or they're correct, usually. They're more correct than dictatorships, at the very least. So anyway, this guy is saying that he wants to erase those protections against a dictatorship so that the president can just do whatever he wants with no repercussions, no stopgaps, no preventions or checks and balances. Just get in there and change the government, change the country to your liking. That's it. Anyway, the point is that they're describing creating a dictatorship and how they want to go about doing it. That's the idea here. That is psychotic. This is why it's so deeply disturbing, Project 2025, because of shit like this. And they're like warping it and turning it into something that it's not and making it more like, happy-go-lucky fun. Look, it's just fun. Look, we're just creating new jobs for people is all in the government. I mean, those people have to be loyalists to Trump and willing to violate the law and circumvent checks and balances to democracy, but we're creating jobs. It's just insane. It is insane.
Think about it. These are the
I have, and it's disturbing.
only people at their agency who are accountable to the president and who serve at his pleasure. What does the number of appointees suggest about the president's accountability to the people who really matter, the voters? Or imagine what would happen if almost all federal employees opposed a certain president.
Well, that's the thing. They don't right now because they're non-political. They have non-political jobs. What he's describing is changing that to make them political. He is creating a what-if scenario that's disturbing to people and saying we need to do this. This is wild to me.
Or imagine what would happen if almost all federal employees opposed a certain president. Would you bet on just a few thousand people to overcome the massive federal bureaucracy?
He's trying to create that scenario.
Some people want to reduce the number of political appointees or reclassify more positions as reserved for career employees.
Yes, absolutely. Fewer political positions that can be manipulated by the president. The Department of Justice, I'm not convinced it should be a political position. Like Bill Barr was over the Department of Justice. Why is that a political thing? If we want to change the Department of Justice, shouldn't we do it through like executive action or the Supreme Court or Congress? Why does the president have the ability to do that? Doesn't seem right to me. I mean, I'm open to arguments against that, but what is going on?
And not political appointees. Some on the right even say that we, because we believe in small government, should just lead by example and not fill certain political positions.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little hypocritical to do it the other way, right?
I suggest that it would be almost impossible to bring any conservative change to America if the president did that.
So the point that he's driving at is I want to impose change. I want to set up a system in which Donald Trump is not beholden to any checks or balances so that he can do whatever he wants and people will just follow his instructions, whether they're legal instructions or not. He wants to set up a system like that.
That it would be almost impossible to bring any conservative change to America.
That's nuts, dude. That is nuts.
If the president did that. So, who are these political appointees? Well, some you've heard of. Some are household names. The Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, really any cabinet secretary. But those are just a small fraction of all political appointees. Most political appointees are people you haven't heard of. Now, the ones I mentioned, like the cabinet level people, those are what we call PASs, or Presidential Appointment with Senate Confirmation. Their offices are created by statute.
Right, because it says that the president will pick these people with the consent of Congress, specifically the Supreme Court, for example. I think Senate confirmation is necessary. So the president picks them, the Senate accepts or rejects them. And I guess that this guy is like trying to create a scenario in which the president doesn't need Congress's approval for this, or I'm not sure.
And their salary is set by law. In addition to presidential appointments with Senate confirmation, there are also PAs, presidential appointments that don't require Senate confirmation. An example of a PAS is the Deputy Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. An example of a PA, presidential appointment without Senate confirmation, is the Treasurer of the United States. But
I'm not sure why any of these things are political appointments. I mean, I suppose I can see for like the treasurer because, you know, that they dictate economic policy or whatever, but the head of housing and urban development, why is that a political position?
that's not all the political appointees. The ones who aren't appointed by the president directly are hired under various authorities, various hiring authorities. The most common authority is Schedule C. This refers to accepted federal service that is confidential or policymaking in nature. Schedule Cs include 22-year-olds just out of college working their first job. They include seasoned veterans of multiple administrations who've come out of retirement to work for the president they love. And they include everybody in between. A majority of political appointees are Schedule C appointees. Another prominent hiring authority that is used for political appointees is the Senior Executive Service, or SES, specifically non-career SES. The Senior Executive Service was established during the presidency of Jimmy Carter in the 1970s, and it was designed to ensure that well-qualified people could serve in the federal government at executive levels above the normal civil service. About 10% of SESs can be non-career or political. So a good percentage of political appointees are hired under SES authority. Many senior political appointees, not exactly household names, but known among the Beltway political class, are non-career SES appointees. Now, every 4 years, the government publishes a report to Congress on policy and supporting positions. It's informally known as the Plum Book, and I highly recommend that you check it out.
It's so interesting that they're like explaining how the government functions in ways that the rest of society doesn't really know, in areas that the society doesn't know, really, because it's unimportant largely. But they're describing these areas that they intend to co-opt, to take over. That is nuts, man.
In December of 2020, the most recent Plum Book, across all federal agencies, there were 1,118 PAS positions, presidential appointment with Senate confirmation. There were 354 PA positions, presidential appointment without Senate confirmation. There were 724 non-career SES positions, and there were 1,566 Schedule C positions. That's a total of 3,762, right between.
So Schedule C positions, unimportant largely. They're trying to put loyalists in those positions, and in an ideal world, they would put loyalists in literally every single government position, all 2 million.
Between that 3,000 to 4,000 number that I mentioned earlier. Now, the federal bureaucracy is very complicated, and there are all sorts of rules about creating new positions that are accepted. There are all sorts of rules about what happens when someone who's nominated for a Senate-confirmed position is still awaiting confirmation by the Senate, and who can be acting in that role in the meantime. But those are stories for a different video. For now, think about those approximately 3,700 political appointees that I mentioned. They serve at the pleasure of the president. Sometimes we all get a reminder that they serve at the pleasure of the president, like when the president fires a cabinet secretary. But in fact, all political appointees serve at the pleasure of the president. What must they be thinking about as they go into their office every morning?
Doing their job? That's not what he's going to say, of course. He's going to say they must be thinking about how they can help Donald Trump.
What pitfalls do they need to watch out for? And how on earth did they get there in the first place? Well, as I mentioned, Caitlin Stumpf was my deputy at the White House and is now my colleague at the Heritage Foundation. And Caitlin's going to explain a little more about how these people did get to where they are.
Largely, I think people like this got to where they are through their connections that they have. Like, my wife is in law school last semester right now. She is so close to done. It's ridiculous. We can almost taste it. It's so close. Anyway, by being in law school, she has met the deputy commissioner of New York City. She's met, the Human Rights Council for New York City and a whole bunch of other very high up, very important people in important positions. And she doesn't have a law degree right now, right? So it's like the positions that she's been in don't require a degree at all, technically, but they prefer people in law school. So it depends on who you know. Do you know people in the positions that can appoint these people? If you do, you're likely to get the job. The point is, it's all about favoritism, nepotism, things like that. And you can break into it if you have $500,000 to spend on a law degree and 3 years of your life to spend on it. Anyway, yeah, let's keep listening here.
So, we just learned about several types of federal jobs. And I bet you're wondering, how can I obtain a political appointment in the next presidential administration? Well, the answer is PPO. PPO stands for the Presidential Personnel Office. It's an office in the White House that acts on behalf of the president to meet his staffing needs. It is structured like many other offices in the White House. There's a director who is an assistant to the president, perhaps a deputy director and associate directors who are often special assistants to the president, and various other staff who report to the director and his associates. The main mission of PPO is to identify, recruit, and evaluate candidates for all political appointments and nominations across the federal government. Some questions that PPO may help answer include: who will be the ambassador to France? Who will be the chief of staff at the Department of Commerce?
That's why this stuff is important, because they can appoint all kinds of people that set policy that's so consequential.
Will serve as a senior advisor to the Secretary of the Treasury? And who will fill that entry-level position at the Department of Housing and Urban Development? This is where PPO comes in. Now, each role is unique, and for those higher-level positions, such as the ones in the president's cabinet, the president likes to select those people himself. However, PPO can still have a role to play here. They can still identify and pass along candidates to be interviewed by the president. It depends on the administration, but the director of PPO and the president will meet to go over 3 important topics: new and upcoming vacancies, the ongoing nomination process, and how the political appointees across the federal government are serving the president. There are 2 important points to remember when thinking about PPO and staffing. First, for higher-level positions that require Senate confirmation, it is up to the Senate to determine when to convene and vote on these nominees. Second, PPO focuses on federal agency hiring, not White House hiring. So, each head of every White House office is able to staff his or her own office. PPO shapes the various federal agencies because it is the entity that acts on behalf of the president to ensure robust and effective political management of those agencies. We've also discussed the difference between accepted federal service and the regular career federal hiring process. An important difference to remember is who does the evaluation of a candidate's qualifications. When it comes to political appointments, PPO is the agency acting on behalf of the president.
You catching what she's saying here? What's important is who decides who is qualified to operate in these positions. We want to deck out this office that makes these decisions with Trump loyalists so that we can just pass through anybody that we want. That's what she's saying right now.
Determining if a candidate is qualified. It's not relevant if the media or other people in the administration disagree about a person's qualifications. If PPO believes in them, then they have the job. Now, a brief digression is in order here. We just talked about political hiring, which PPO does. But PPO still works with the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM. That office is responsible for creating HR policy for all federal employees.
So they want to get people into basically the HR department for the entire federal government, effectively, right? So that they can set HR policy and hire people that they want to hire. And, you know, if possible, just completely ignore anti-discrimination laws. I mean, they've already expressed their interest in erasing anti-discrimination laws by getting rid of affirmative action, for example.
Suppose you have a federal employee who is delinquent or failing at their job. How many warnings should be issued to this person? Who should be responsible in issuing them? What if the employee alleges that despite what it looks like, they are actually suffering from retaliation or discrimination based on their sex or race? OPM, OPM, OPM. OPM.
So, Office of, what was it called? The Office of People Management?
Federal employees. Suppose you have a federal employee.
Hold on.
Which PPO does. But PPO still works with the Office of Personnel Management.
Office of Personnel Management. Okay.
Or OPM. That office is responsible for creating HR policy for all federal employees. Suppose you have a federal employee who is delinquent or failing at their job. How many warnings should be issued to this person? Who should be responsible in issuing them? What if the employee alleges that despite what it looks like, they are actually suffering from retaliation or discrimination based on their sex or race? OPM, OPM, OPM. OPM is the entity that would deal with all of these questions. One thing we understood during our time in the Trump administration is the importance of retaining political control over OPM.
You catching this? What happens if somebody is being discriminated against? OPM handles it, and we want to retain political control over OPM. That's nuts, dude. That is nuts. I mean, you're starting to see the problem with Project 2025, I assume, right?
There were several career employees in powerful positions that hindered the work of the president and his staff. These were later replaced by political appointees. OPM is the federal entity that actually processes the paperwork of political appointees once PPO has selected them. It is vital for PPO and political leadership of OPM to have a productive working relationship and to speak regularly about personnel strategy. If PPO is the who, OPM is the how. Once PPO selects someone to be hired, OPM is responsible for onboarding them. There are many issues that affect the federal workforce that go beyond the typical HR issues we are all familiar with. For example, how many political appointees are there? Can there be any new roles created? Which positions, if any, are reserved for career federal employees and why?
Interesting. So OPM is the office that decides which positions are political appointed and which ones are just career employee appointed. And they want to gain control of the office that makes those decisions so that they can modify it to turn every position political. I love that they're laying out their entire plan here. This is so interesting, but absolutely psychotic in every way.
Which federal employees are considered essential during a pandemic, a blizzard, or a government shutdown? Under what authority should non-career federal employees be hired? And what is the process for converting a Schedule C employee into a career federal employee? OPM makes crucial decisions about these sorts of things. OPM also has an important role to play when it comes to security clearances. Political appointees,
Security clearances. Everything that they're mentioning right now, there's a reason for it. Why would they bring up security clearances if it was not relevant to what they're trying to communicate? They wouldn't, right? They're only talking about things that, like, they care about with OPM. The things that they care about so far, which they've mentioned: anti-discrimination policies, security clearances. This is insane.
especially those at the Senate.
You know, I honestly believe that Kamala Harris is going to win. And to be perfectly honest, I believe that Joe Biden would have won also if he had been running for president. Donald Trump just is not popular, truthfully. And people are actively opposed to him. I believe that the majority of RFK and Nikki Haley primary voters would have voted for Harris or not voted at all, one of the two. I do not believe Trump would have won, and I don't think he's going to win now. But the fact that these people are drawing up this plan to commandeer the government and the way that it functions is insane. It is insane.
Confirmed level require security clearances to complete their jobs. OPM plays a role in the speed of this process. Because personnel is policy, as the saying goes, PPO is in many ways the key to a successful administration.
So she says OPM affects the speed of security clearance process. So we can speed it up and just have them kind of gloss over it and not look for any connections you may have to, say, Russia, for example. We can speed this whole thing up and just give you the clearance if we control the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management. Holy shit, man.
But if PPO and OPM do not have alignment, there will not be any success.
So, PPO, the Presidential Personnel Office, decides who gets a job as a political appointee. And OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, makes it happen. But what does the process look like for you, the prospective appointee? Well, first, you should assess your own interests and your own qualifications. Do you believe in the president's vision? Do you
so they're listing qualifications. Do you agree with Donald Trump?
believe in the agenda that he set out during the campaign? Or are you just looking to advance your own career? You can't be a political appointee if you don't believe in the president's vision. It's a tough job, too. You need to be willing to work long hours, to work on weekends. You need to be willing to implement the decisions of your bosses and not just march to the beat of your own drum. You got to be a team player for the boss, the president. Think about what the president campaigned on. Think about what he promised the people who voted for him. What do they expect from the president? And what do they expect from you?
Okay, so they're saying that the president has an obligation to fulfill his promises that he made to, the people on the campaign trail or whatever. He has an obligation to fulfill those. And right now, he's having trouble fulfilling those promises because they're fucking psychotic and nobody actually wants this shit, like building a border wall. And they don't actually benefit anybody. They don't do anything. Like, building a border wall is not going to stop immigration. Most immigrants come in legally and overstay their visas. But if we control these government agencies, the Office of Budget, the Office of, what was it? the Office of Personnel Management, if we control this with political appointees, we can just completely ignore Congress and the Supreme Court and just do whatever the president wants done. Just appropriate the funds. Whether Congress said, yes, you can use these funds is irrelevant. We're just going to use them. That's the point here. That's what these people are doing.
The president can't do it all on his own. He doesn't have the hours in the day. Some of it has to be done by the political appointees.
Yes, you said that.
So what are you going to do? And what are you going to do when the media goes after you? What are you going to do when the going gets tough?
Why would the media go after you? You know why? Because they intend for these people to do psychotic things and to break the law. That is why they expect the media to go after them.
Those are questions that you need to be asking yourself if you're interested in being a political appointee. Now, there are a few practical things that you should also know. One of which is that you're probably going to have to live in D.C., the swamp. Most political appointments, the vast majority, are located in the Washington, D.C. area, and you're going to have to relocate at least during the work week. There are a few positions like state directors at certain agencies and regional administrators at certain agencies that are located outside D.C.
Dude, I don't know if this is accurate, so you probably shouldn't take my word for it, but I heard that the new CEO of Starbucks isn't going to relocate to another, so that he can work in the corporate office. He's just going to fly to work every day on his private jet and stay where he lives now. That is so ridiculously stupid and wrong. Dude is releasing an obscene amount of carbon into the atmosphere just so he doesn't have to move to another area. That is insane.
But for the most part, you've got to be willing to live in D.C. The second thing that you should know is that it's much easier in all areas of the federal hiring process if you haven't broken the law. So obey
That's funny. So you can't break the law basically until you get into the position.
the law, and we will have fewer problems with background checks and paperwork for the hiring process. And then the only thing I would say that completely precludes you from serving a president as an appointee is if you don't agree with the president's vision. If you're going to wreck, undermine, and take cheap shots at the president or at other people in his administration, then you definitely cannot be a political appointee. I also recommend that you familiarize yourself with the Plum Book, which I mentioned earlier. It will give you an idea of what positions are available for political appointees, what titles they have, what kinds of positions they are. It'll also give you a little bit of an indication about pay. Now, most federal employees are paid along the general schedule, or the GS, and it's a good approximation of what you'll expect to make as a political appointee.
Yeah, it's all, the GS positions are all standardized. If you get GS 13, GS 15, I think, and once you get those once you reach those levels, your pay is just the same as everyone else's at that level. The military works like that, I believe. My mom is on a GS, whatever you call it. She's on a GS schedule or whatever.
Note that in DC, there is locality pay, which reflects the fact that it's more expensive to live here than in most of America. But also remember that PPO decides how much to pay its appointees within the scope of the law. And you are not going to be on the normal federal hiring process, and you aren't necessarily going to be on the GS scale, the GS schedule. But it's a good approximation of what you can expect. If you're making millions of dollars a year in the private sector, then you're certainly going to get a pay cut if you become a political appointee. If you're just about to graduate college and looking for your first job, then being a political appointee might seem like a lot of money. And then, of course, there's everybody in between. But you and your family should have realistic expectations regardless. And you
Okay, great.
should familiarize yourself with the general schedule and the Washington, D.C. locality pay. If you want to be an appointee, I also recommend that you network. Network.
Absolutely. That's what this is all about, 100%. It's all about who you know. That's what it boils down to.
Everything in D.C. is about who you know. So get involved in politics, volunteer for candidates and causes you care about, go to happy hours, go to events at conservative organizations and on Capitol Hill, and always treat others with respect, because you never know in Washington where your next job is going to come from.
Absolutely.
It's not unusual at all to work for someone who was once your intern. So when you're being considered for a political appointment, you're going to interview with PPO, the Presidential Personnel Office. Let's assume that you're not being considered for a cabinet level role. You'll probably meet with 1 to 2 PPO staff who have a certain portfolio, and they're going to interview you for a position. Sometimes they are considering you for a specific position. They have you as a candidate in mind. And sometimes they're just getting to know you and figuring out your qualifications and trying to determine where you would best fit in the administration. Caitlin and I have done hundreds of these interviews. In addition to the typical questions that you're going to get asked at any job interview, PPO is probably also going to ask you to describe your political views, to talk about what attracted you.
Wait, why would they ask you about your political views? I don't understand why that would be a factor at all. It seems to me that this stuff should be apolitical, these jobs, right? Like, it seems like a worker for the Department of Energy who cleans up like nuclear waste or something should be apolitical. That's how it feels to me. Am I the idiot here?
To the president's campaign. PPO is going to ask you to talk about what you want to do on behalf of the president at the relevant agency.
Why would they do that?
PPO also might ask you to name some public figures or other politicians whom you admire, who you look up to. That's all part of the PPO interview process. As in any interview, it's important to remember to put yourself in the other person's shoes. You know, when I was interviewing people on behalf of President Trump, he wasn't there. So I had to ask myself, what would the president want me to ask this person?
WWTD, what would Trump do?
What would he say if he were sitting right here? What is he looking for?
You're a loser. You're fired. That's what he'd say.
In this kind of position. No one is entitled to just work for the president. PPO has to make that decision. I will also say that everybody who comes before PPO will be treated with respect. PPO will act with integrity. PPO will put themselves in the other person's shoes.
Really? Okay, that doesn't sound like the Republican way to me.
As well. Now, there's just a side note here. You know, it can feel like a big deal to be interviewing at the White House for a job, to be talking to somebody who represents the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world. But think about all the people who came before you, and think about all the people who will be political appointees well into the future. It's a real honor to be considered to work for the president, and I hope that I never lose a sense of awe that I had when I spoke for the president, when I interviewed people on his behalf. The bottom line is that if you're smart, if you're willing to work hard, and if you share the values of the president, PPO is going to like you, and PPO is going to get you into the administration.
And that's what's important, that they like you, because this is all about who they like the most, right? This is all about, special treatment, favoritism.
One way or another, we'll find you the right seat on the bus, but it's important to get...
You catching this? We'll find the right seat on the bus, i.e., you will fit in somewhere. You have to keep trying. If you are, like, obsessed with Donald Trump, we will find a spot for you.
Get people onto the bus early in an administration, the right people. PPO also is going to support you as an appointee. That's what PPO likes to do. It likes to support the best appointees, promote the best appointees, and hear what they're doing at their agencies to advance the president's agenda. Remember, it's also possible that PPO will want to re-interview all of its appointees. There's always high turnover in administrations, and people move around between agencies frequently, especially between a president's first and second term or after the midterm elections, things like that. Think about...
Yeah, that's the thing. Yes, they do. There's high turnover with political appointees. These people are trying to make everybody a political appointee. Everybody. So what they're doing will basically do one of two things. Either it will completely cripple the government and how it operates entirely, make it useless because nobody in these positions has any experience whatsoever, or they will stay in those positions and work for Trump and do what Trump wants, whether they're under like a Democrat or not. That's the aim here, the goal that they're shooting for.
This from PPO's perspective. Does PPO want to interview you one time, give you a job, and then never hear from you again? Or does PPO want to interview you, give you a job, and form a relationship with you and learn about what you're doing
Sounds hot.
through your work at an agency to advance the president's agenda. I think it's the second one. After your PPO interview, if PPO selects you, your information will be sent to the White House Liaison's office at the relevant agency. White House liaisons are chosen by PPO to be PPO's eyes and ears at various federal agencies. There's usually a liaison, a deputy, and several other staff. It's the liaison from the White House to the agency, not the other way around. When PPO indicates that a
I don't understand what that means. The liaison from the White House to the agency?
candidate is a choice for a position, the White House liaison's office starts the paperwork. It's an exciting time. So how long does it take? Well, it depends. One of the things I'm most proud of is that during my time in the Trump administration, we greatly reduced the time it took to get people started in political appointments. Early on, it took months and months. In my own case, it was 9 months from the time I first interviewed until I started at an agency.
This is what I'm talking about. It's difficult and time consuming to get qualified people in these positions. So they want to set up a system in which they get a jump on training people for this, like way ahead of time, like 2 years ahead of time, so they can just jump right in. And Democrats aren't doing psychotic shit. And they just want these people to not be political appointees, but just continue doing their jobs. This would cripple the government unless it's a Republican government. That's what this is all about.
But later on, with PPO and White House liaisons on the same page, we were working much faster. And one of the great things about Project 2025 is if we're successful, we're going to be in a position to get thousands of people hired into the new administration in the very first days, just like the Biden administration did, and unlike the bureaucratic delays that often hamper conservative hiring efforts.
Yeah, but they're not just trying to get political appointees in. In fact, Biden didn't even do like a completely different Schedule C set of people. To my knowledge, he just like kept the people in those positions who knew what they were doing. People want to change that here.
As long as we have a strong PPO, strong White House liaisons and deputy White House liaisons, and strong aligned political leadership at the Office of Personnel Management, it won't take more than a few weeks to get you started. Of course, I should say, if you are nominated for a Senate-confirmed position, I can't exactly predict what the Senate will do. But part of Project 2025 is we're going to come up with confirmation and nomination strategies, horse trading with senators to get our people confirmed as quickly as possible.
Horse trading, okay.
As an appointee, you'll definitely want to get to know your White House liaison. White House liaisons are a great resource. They can get you additional staff, they can help you do your job, and they're always working with PPO and political leadership at the Office of Personnel Management to give the president the personnel he deserves. Project 2025
The personnel he deserves.
will be hosting a White House liaison school in the near future, and I encourage all of you to watch that training as well. It's been debated in various conservative ministries.
Okay, weasel words. It has been debated by who? Who's debating anything? What are you talking about? This is like my favorite thing to point out, weasel words. I even got one on like my soundboard here.
I am not confident at all because as it was laid out earlier, I do know that, behind closed doors, while I won't name names.
What the hell does that even mean? Did she just say like literally anything? That's what weasel words are.
It's been debated in various conservative administrations over the years, loyalty versus experience. There are good arguments that loyalty and ideology in political appointees are more important than experience.
No, there are not. Are you shitting me right now? Oh my God, I have to write this down. This is crazy. Federal workforce. Project 2025 training videos. Federal workforce. This is, I don't have this one. I got to take this down. 29 minutes. Loyalty to the president is more important than experience. Wow, man.
There are good arguments that loyalty and ideology in political appointees are more important than experience.
No.
President Nixon supposedly said that he preferred experienced people, President Reagan rejected this false dichotomy. While
False dichotomy. Okay.
it's true that different administrations have different priorities, one thing is clear. If a president gets the wrong personnel who are not loyal to his agenda, he will pay a steep price.
Okay, well, that's the thing. The people who are most qualified to be in those positions, like, say, for example, the person that's most qualified to run the nuclear cleanup wing of the Department of Energy is the nuclear scientist who has worked there for the past 30 years. It's not a false dichotomy to have either experience or loyalty. There is one guy with experience in this field. So if you're going to like remove him and replace him with some loyalist nutcase, then you are picking loyalty over experience. Though it is a dichotomy by necessity, by its nature.
Seen that over and over again. If you want to be a political appointee, you can be a political appointee if you're aligned with the president.
Jesus, dude.
You don't need a master's in public policy. You don't need to have spent your career in Washington, D.C. You don't need to have written 40 academic articles.
Oh my God.
You don't need to have litigated billion-dollar cases or argued in front of the Supreme Court. The career federal HR bureaucrats don't decide who's qualified to be a political appointee.
That is absolutely insane.
PPO decides who's qualified to be a political appointee. The president was elected by the people to exercise the executive authority vested in him by the Constitution. He outsources some of that authority to PPO, and PPO hires political appointees who are going to get the president's work done. So, what can you do? Well, the short answer is go to project2025.org today. Fill out our questionnaire. Send us your resume. Get in touch with us. The long answer is get more involved in Project 2025. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we have a policy book that will be released in the spring of 2023. Read it. If you agree with it, you'll feel right at home in our personnel database, which you can again find at project2025.org. If you like this training video, we're going to be doing a lot more, and I hope you'll watch them. Once you've read the book, put yourself in the database, and gotten trained up, we're going to put you to work. We need people to draft executive orders, draft regulations, and think about personnel strategies, nomination strategies, and confirmation strategies across the federal government. Only then
This is insane.
will we be ready on January 20th, 2025. Think about the issues that will face the administration that takes office in 2025. Think about what our country will look like in 2025. Think about what you like.
It'll be a conservative hellscape. I'm sorry, not a conservative hellscape. It will be a Trump loyalist hellscape.
To do. Are you a policy person? Are you good at administrative stuff? Do you like human resources or information technology? There are political appointments in all of those categories.
So the point is, he just came out and said it blatantly. I don't care if you're qualified for this job. It means nothing to me. I care if you are willing to blindly follow the president's orders no matter what. You can learn on the job as you go. That is insane.
If you like to travel, maybe advance would be good for you because the president and the secretaries take a lot of cool trips. If you want to be in political communications, you're halfway there already if you're a good writer. Have you worked previously on
Wow, dude.
Capitol Hill? Have you worked for a governor or state legislators? There are a lot of political appointments where that experience can come in handy. As long as you share the values that must drive
Did he just say come in handies? Okay.
can come in handy. As long as you share the values that must drive the next administration. As long as you're willing to work long hours on behalf of the president and his priority. And as long as you demonstrate courage under fire and a proven track record of holding firm under pressure, you can be a political appointee. You can bring the conservative change to Washington that we all need. Visit project2025.org today and put yourself in contention for a role in the next administration.
This is nuts.
Thank you so much for watching this training video. I hope you'll stay involved in Project 2025 and spread the word to your friends and family.
Holy Christ, bro. People did. They spread the word to their friends and family, and now there's deep outrage over what they're planning, over what they're doing. It's just insane. You know, Trump doesn't have any policy. None. Like, what is he even running on? He's running on loyalty. That's it. It's all about people following his instructions and expectations and all of that other stuff. Nothing, no more, no less. And that's where the Heritage Foundation comes in. These people are writing the policy on Trump's behalf and forming out a deep state for him. So these people are writing policy about banning contraception, banning gay marriage on a federal level, or even constitutional amendments or whatever, banning abortion federally, you know, whatever other, just massive government overreach for all their bluster about small government. Those are the policies that they are pushing for, these people that we're listening to. And they're creating a pathway for Donald Trump to accomplish their goals. So Trump can run on culture war issues and bitch about how mistreated he is nonstop. And these people can slowly, carefully work a Christian nationalist, extremist plan, work that into the administration. And of course, Trump's just going to follow the instructions, whatever these people want, because why does he give a shit? He doesn't. He doesn't care if people lose everything to Christian nationalism. He doesn't give a shit if abortion is banned for all of these people. He's not having kids anymore, I assume. And if he does need an abortion, you just get him to Canada. It's that easy. Get an abortion that way. I'm sure he has doctors on staff that will prescribe all kinds of medicines for him if he needs them. These things don't affect Donald Trump, and he doesn't care because of that. He's willing to do literally anything to get into power, to hold power, and to implement the agenda of the people who put him there. It is so insane and disturbing. Tell me what you think about this, dude, in the comments.